Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Community Security Initiative's webinar on applying for the New York State Securing Communities Against Hate Crimes grant. It's that time again. You have a lot of questions, so do we, but hopefully having the guru in our pocket, David Pollack, will help answer a lot of those and get you in the right direction. For those of you not familiar, I see a lot of new names and faces. The Community Security Initiative is the UJA Federation of New York and JCRC powered security group for the community here in New York. And one of the things we do is assist navigating the grants. Um, the New York State Securing Community Against Hate Crimes, SCAHC, by the end, we'll have it all, those acronyms all clear, was released due July 8th. So we have a lot to cover today. We're going to go longer than our general webinars usually have an hour. We might hit an hour and a half or longer if you want to stay on for questions. But I'd point out to you, you don't need to master everything from this presentation today. The slides are already on our website. We'll put the link in the chat. David will share it a few times as he discusses, but focus on the big picture stuff, understanding what's required, what are those things to keep the needle moving forward. And today we're focusing primarily on the application. For those of you wonks and experienced people who read the RFA, there's also some changes to the procurement side, meaning the back end. Once you get this grant, how you spend the funds, the requirements there. We're not going to get into that today, just the application side. So, and the last note I'll say is this time slot, first Tuesday of the month at 4 is generally when CSI has our regular training webinars on topics beyond our standard menu to make sure we're timely and on topic for things happening out there in the world. And today, this is one of those, being forward thinking on the upcoming grant. So with that, I will turn it over to David Pollack. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dove. Thank you, Jamie. Jamie will be conveying your questions as they come in if I've confused a lot of people. Otherwise, we're going to handle a lot of the questions toward the end. So welcome. First, a disclaimer. We're doing as the best we can do to give you the best information that we can. And I want to make an admission. As I was trying to read the RFA, I am guilty of screaming at my computer because I was trying to figure out what are they saying. And I did my best. I'm pretty experienced at this, but there are some challenges here. So if we say we don't know, it's because we don't know. And we'll get to it, but if you see anything today or tomorrow, any questions that I didn't answer, feel free to send questions to DCJS. Any questions on the RFA are due by tomorrow, and they will be answered. I know we're all waiting with bated breath, but they will be answered May 29th. So, please show that we share your frustration. Okay, this is what we're going to cover today. And the link to this PowerPoint is already in the chat. You can download it. And it's on the Security Grants website, CSI-NY.org/security grants. So it's available, it's out there, and as we know more, we update it. Okay, what do we know? We know that Governor Hochul announced the grant on April 15th, and New York State has handed out $131.5 million since 2021, funding 1,700 projects and 336 organizations. This year, the grant will have up to $70 million. Why do we say up to? Because if any of you are watching Albany, New York State doesn't have a budget yet. So They know they have 35 million from last year's budget that they didn't spend. And we know that the governor has asked for another 35 for this year. We don't know, the budget may pass this week, maybe next week, but I'm pretty sure we'll end up having $70 million. They are giving a ceiling of $250,000. That's more than in past years. They expect about 280 grants. By the way, that's twice as many state grants than we anticipate the federal NSGP grants. Many of you submitted grant applications in January. There were 997 applications submitted, close to 1,000. We didn't quite break the 1,000 barrier yet, but there's only going to be around 140 federal grants. There will be more state grants. You'll have twice the probability of success if you stick with it. And you're supposed to get your project done in 24 months. But, if you can't do that, you can work with your program manager and get an extension, hopefully. They just gave extensions, offered extensions for everyone holding a grant from 2022 to 2024. Okay, this is my traditional slide. There's rule number 1, learn how to read and follow directions. Rule number 2, there is no rule number 2. It's number 3, see rule number 1. So Dov is smiling. He's heard this for 20 years. And it's, basically, if you don't follow their directions, you can be disqualified. Even, remember I said there were 997 applications for the NSGP. 122 were thrown out because they didn't follow directions. Now, my opinion is this grant is more complicated than the federal grant. So following directions becomes more important than ever. Okay. What do you have to be? You have to be a nonprofit under 501c3 or self-certified. If you're a house of worship, you can say, hi, I'm a house of worship. We have examples of how to say that. You must be pre-qualified. We'll have much more on that later. Each organization can only submit one application for $250,000, but they can spread that $250,000 over multiple sites if they own or use them. Organization must be at risk of hate crimes or attacks due to ideology, beliefs, or mission. You are going to have to document that. We'll get to that later. You must maintain your tax exempt status through the life of the grant. And prior state grant recipients may apply only if the proposed project is new or expands previous work. We'll get into that several times later. I keep repeating it just so people understand it. And if you're a first timer, you get 5 points and 5 bonus points. So you have a pretty good chance of winning. What can you get? Door hardening services and locking systems, all these kinds of physical security. I don't have to read the list for you, but you should know that this is a reimbursement grant. In other words, you're going to have to lay out money to do an installation, and the state will reimburse you. But they will only reimburse you for items purchased during the contract term. In other words, After you signed a contract and you put something in and you can document it, you can apply for reimbursement. One other matter that is available, more information is on our website for Jewish groups in New York City, Long Island, and Westchester at least. There are free loans available to subsidize, to help you get the grant. There may be loan money for other denominations. We're working on it, but I can't promise that now. Okay, you can do cybersecurity enhancements. They are very open to cybersecurity enhancements, but what it seems to me to be, and if someone wants to ask this question, go ahead, but the list that I see over here is cybersecurity equipment for your network. So if you have old, obsolete Windows 10 computers in a computer lab or in a classroom, I don't think the state will replace those, even though they are a huge security risk. And we offer cybersecurity assessments. You can get those. You can go to our website, CSI-NY.org, and look for the box that says request request one. Jamie, do you have the poll up while we're doing that? If you click the poll, we have some questions for you. And, if you click on that, we'll be in touch and reach out because, we're going to try to do cybersecurity assessments. We have until July 8th. That's the deadline. But, remember that we want to do a lot of work, but, we're human beings and we can deliver what we can and we will. Okay. Now, what do you have to do? Get pre-qualified. We have a dedicated pre-qualification page on our website, and there are tutorials for each phase of pre-qualification. But if you are not pre-qualified, please, please, please start now, because this can take 4 to 6 weeks if you really stay on top of it. I see someone from Queens on our show today. He just looked at me, and he's been working very hard, but he will testify that they send back, they want more information. So that's, plan on it. Don't wait till the last minute. And for every grant, every year, people call us 1.5 weeks, 2 weeks before the grant. Oh, can we apply now? And we say, no, it's too late. You'll never get pre-qualified. So that's something. You have to conduct a vulnerability assessment. They have a self-assessment tool. Now, the RFA says that you can use outside assessments. They're allowed if they are current, and current is defined as less than a year old, not more than a year old. I think the best course of action is if you have an assessment from us or from someone else, what you should do is to take the relevant sections and copy and paste the information into their tool. That, as long as their tool is up to date, it's fine. As long as the information is current, you'll be okay. That's what you're working on. You have to register for GMS. That is their grant management system. Now, If only New York State would make our life a little bit easier. But a lot of faces I see here are used to e-grants, but e-grants doesn't do you any good. This is a different agency. It'll be a different app. You have to use their step-by-step GMS application manual. That just shows you how to upload the information you need. It's pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to spend time here. But there's something new, since I do see on my screen, grant writers. If you're using a grant writer, you are required to do a GMS attestation letter. There's a link here, which means that you have to say, hi, so-and-so is my grant writer, and I give them permission. Not complicated, but they want to know, because they've seen some problems in the past, that someone is in fact working on your behalf. You're going to have to prepare your application and submit by noon. You don't get till close of business. You don't get till midnight. By noon, July 8th. And, you don't get extra points for working over the holiday weekend. Okay. Now, what are they going to look at? Vulnerability assessment findings, quality of your project narrative, cost reasonableness, organizational capacity. And remember, I talked about the 5-point bonus. Now, something that is frustrating to work through, but it's part of New York State's rules. 30% of your grant must be spent with MWBE, that's minority or women business enterprises. That's a requirement. It's possible to get a waiver if you've jumped through multiple hoops, but plan on complying. And that applies to all grant contracts, and applicants are urged to use New York State vendors and disabled veterans, but there's no quota, there's no specific number set to do that. Start early. I've said that you should be specific about threats. We'll go into that. Explain how your proposed projects differ from anything you've done before. Use their self-assessment tool. Detail your budget. And here's where you can get help from DCGIS. They will basically answer questions well. If it's, I can't get into GMS, I forgot my password, they're very good at that. They only answer substantive questions if they're submitted by tomorrow. And even when you submit substantive questions, they will answer them in the same oblique, difficult language that appears in the RFA. So please understand my frustration. We're just trying to figure all this out and give you the best guidance possible. Okay, now they score 15 questions. The value of those questions add up to 100. And the goal is to get 100. No one's going to get 100. I can tell you right now. It's virtually impossible to get 100. But you have to answer the questions. You have to answer the questions within GMS, and very, 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 very important, you have to put all of the answers to all of the questions in a Word document. The Word document has to be in Arial font, 11 points. and 1.5 lines spacing. Okay, they're anal. I understand that. But if you do not upload this separate document, you have a tier 1 violation. You get the buzzer thrown out of the game. So remember, read and follow instructions. This is an important instruction. The first question is really easy, but you don't get any points for it, is what type of facility are you seeking funding for? And they give you specific answers, or there's an opportunity to say other, and then you have to tell what you are. So, for example, I think I saw some offices out there. If that's the case, if you're an office, you're an other, and you just and choose the description. Questions 2 and 3, no points. Provide your organization's mission statement. And that's just, you often have a mission statement on your website. You just cut a copy and paste it into GMS and into your Word document. And you want to provide a narrative to describe your nonprofit. They want to know size of membership, number of people served, the community served, primary use of the facility, days and hours of operation, peak occupancy. Now, this has 0 points, but it helps them understand the organization. And again, you're graded on your narrative. So you want a narrative that works well and helps the reviewers, know what you're into. Okay, describe your organization's risk of hate crime based on its ideology, beliefs, or missions. Include if there's a symbolic value of the site as a highly recognized national, statewide, or local or historical institution that renders the organization as a possible focus of a hate crime. So, first of all, I found that there's a terrific document, and here's a link, that was prepared by the National Counterterrorism Center and DHS and FBI about threats against houses of worship. And it discusses much of the reasons, the risks for hate crimes based on ideology, beliefs, or mission. There's all kinds of classic hate. Use this document as a jumping off point. Use AI, but please make sure your AI is making sense. You can say, for example, I'm looking at some of the people here. Why would a Pentecostal church be at risk of a hate crime? And they will probably give you an answer and see if it makes sense. Now, symbolic value. For example, I just put 3 pictures in that struck me. This is the mosque on 96th Street. It's clear it stands out against the skyline. People exiting the FDR drive past it and they see it. There are 60 nations that worship, people from 60 nations worship at that mosque. That's an example of symbolic value. I have St. Patrick's Cathedral there on Fifth Avenue. Obviously, a cathedral being the seat of the diocese or archdiocese has symbolic value. And you explain that. And then at the bottom, I have 770 Eastern Parkway, which is headquarters of the Chabad movement. And that also is something of Chabad, of symbolic value. And people have targeted each of these targets because they're out there. They are high profile organizations, and it counts. Now, if you have a little symbolic value, say so. If you're a nondescript synagogue in the neighborhood, say so. But they're looking to, there's 0 points here, but they have to look for things that distinguish. Oh, good. I do have someone from pictures on the previous slide. Okay. Question 5. They want to know if you got a grant before, tell us what you did with it and location and nature. So we put in 10 cameras. This is where we put in the 10 cameras. And it must provide sufficient detail, including photos of previously funded state or federal projects for DCJS to determine that the proposed project is different and distinct. And then by submitting this, you're swearing on a stack of pancakes. I saw a smile of someone who recognized that phrase. You're swearing that this is different. Now, you can say no previous grants. You can say we're replacing unreliable or obsolete cameras. That were installed 10 years before. That's legitimate as long as your vulnerability assessment says so. Similarly, you should report that you're installing perimeter fencing in a new area if you have a big space. And now, if you put in for a grant in the NSGP 2025, well, duh, we don't know if you won the grant. So you don't have to include anything in the grant. And, I can't predict when any applicant will be notified that they have a NSGP 2025 grant. Sorry. I'm not so great at being a prophet. Okay, they want a vulnerability assessment, and that is in 3 parts, each 3 questions, and each is worth 10 points. Now, remember, I said, if you're doing multiple sites, you're a school and you have a preschool, a primary school, a middle school, and an upper school. And you're going to need an assessment for each one of those buildings, even if everything totals $250,000, which is the cap per organization. Applications for a project relating to cybersecurity requires a cybersecurity self-assessment. We offer to help you with that. And as I mentioned, your vulnerability assessment must be current. And, again, as I said before, consider copying and pasting relevant vulnerabilities, findings, and recommendations to use the nomenclature of the CSI vulnerability assessment. you can paste that stuff in the appropriate box. Now, this is the first thing. They want to know, clearly identify the perceived threats to the facility or the organization's cyber resources. Now, select all the threats that apply, but it's very important, and they're going to come back to this. First and foremost, if you've had firsthand experience with any of the listed threats, detail those in the comments box. So that's number one. Then you go to similarly situated organizations. Now, first of all, threats. They have, for example, this is from the self-assessment. I personally, and I think the other people on the CSI team would agree, all of our organizations are susceptible to all of these threats, with the exception of organizations that are on the 14th floor of a midtown office building, which might not be too susceptible to vehicle ramming because you're up on the 14th floor. So here I talked about the comments section. Here's where you put the threats. And by the way, they don't give you checkoffs, but cybersecurity threats, ransomware, phishing, malware, identity theft, and website defacement. So what I did here that I can't get rid of right now is, essentially I put into Gemini, which is part of is a Google product, and you can access it through Chrome. Tell me about recent threats to Jewish organizations over recent months, and it came up with a very, very long list, and you can probably think of it. And it says that Jews are targeted. It's said in Gemini 55% of the time, because I did this last week. Well, today an article came out that NYPD now reports that in April it jumped to 60%. Well, I'd rather it didn't, but that we have to deal with that. So when I'll fix this up, so that when you download it, you can see all of it. This is something that you can gather this information fairly easily. I have something. CSI had a internal training for our team and some of our colleagues on vehicle ramming and defending against vehicle ramming. So Herb Ubens, who's the our go-to consultant on ramming, has this list of just ramming incidents. If you're going to be asking for defenses against ramming, make sure you're mentioning incidents that inform your decision. West Bloomfield, that was a ramming attack. And, the design of the bollards failed. But so the guy drove around, the attacker drove around the bollards into the synagogue. But this is something, thanks Herb for giving us this information. Here is the NYPD hate crimes task dashboard. So you can look at all kinds of hate crimes and put statistics in on that. Thank you. Our colleagues at the Diocese of Brooklyn sent me something that they've put together listing all the horrible hate crimes against churches in the Diocese of Brooklyn and Queens. So, this is information you collect, and the more information you give them, if it's applicable, it's likely to help your score. And remember, I said this is 10 points. So you want to get as close to 10 points as possible. So next, identify the vulnerabilities of your facility or your organization's cyber resources. And, again, this is in their vulnerability self-assessment tool. You can go and look at your CSI assessment and just cut and paste it, because we're using similar language. Our format answers all the questions. Even if you have a 6-month-old CSI assessment, I don't know if the reviewer will go through 40 pages to find the information. So it might be easier to put it in. You might have a better chance of success. It's not easy. You have a better chance of success if you put it in. Look at their self-assessment tool. These are the sections, and there are details and recommendations. And you answer yes to the query. Closed circuit television cameras are installed and can record for at least 30 days. So you can say yes, but then you put in 10 of the 15 cameras are unreliable and obsolete. It is recommended that these 10 cameras be replaced with up-to-date models. So give them the map that you're making good decisions, figuring out how you're going to develop a plan to upgrade, to harden your facility. And you want to let them know that you've thought about this and you've put together the information to justify this kind of purchase. And, this example shows how to convey the information to determine how the proposed project is different and distinct. Remember, we said that. Describe how the vulnerabilities are linked to the threats. Now, for example, take some information, you take your information. They're asking the question, speed bumps, and apologies to Dove, because speed bumps are an inappropriate term, but the state uses it anyway, are used to slow vehicular movements on the ground. Anti-vehicle bollards have been implemented or considered. So, if you're talking about a vulnerability and the threat that you're thinking of is a vehicle ramming, because you know what happened in West Bloomfield, Michigan, the key vulnerability includes a lack of rated protected barriers and traffic calming speed control measures, which is the appropriate term, to protect vehicular entranceways, humans, and the facility itself. The installation of a well-designed vehicle interdiction system would help minimize the likelihood of harm to people and structures, and create a harder target to compromise, provide a visual deterrent to a hostile actor conducting surveillance, and possibly deter the attacker. Such measures will help to limit, delay, and slow vehicles. So, there's the vulnerability and it's linked to the threat. Here, I kind of replicated the self-assessment, and here's what they say, and you answer yes or no. It discusses the vulnerabilities right here, and it links them to the threats. Question 7, is there a history of hate crimes at the facility or cyber attacks to the organization? If yes, provide a narrative. If no, you can't answer anything. So it's very, very important to know if there are, you know, uh, intimidation, harassment, disruption, physical attacks, bomb threats, vandalism, graffiti, arson, active threats, social media threats. It's all of these are out there. And if you have anything, you don't have to prove that it's a hate crime. If someone is threatening you because of your mission or your ideology or your religion, then let them know about it and fully discuss it and get the 10 points. Make sure to attach documentation. For example, I've received letters from someone of a threatening nature, and I reported it to the police. I have a police report. If there's damage, did you submit it to your insurance company? Was there the swastikas in Queens yesterday has a lot of media reports. So all of those are important, and you add those as attachments, in GMS. If you have, again, these are actual threats that you've had. Now, does the location of the facility contribute to the risk of a hate crime incident? And I have a lot of, problem with this. Yeah, yes, it is your building. Uh, and, for example, we have Temple Emmanuel that is prominent. It is unique. It is on Fifth Avenue. It is on the transverse. So all of these things add up to location being a factor. It is historic. It has a museum. Okay, not everyone is Emmanuel. But, as an example, there's a small Buddhist temple on Riverside Drive. And this is a direct quote from an architectural journal, that it's peculiar and wedged in between two large ornate turn-of-the-century row houses. Well, that makes sense. People will kind of say, what's that doing there? And they'll go, and they'll say, well, if I want to attack Buddhists, this might be a place to do it where they might not know of other Buddhist facilities. Certainly not in the immediate area. Now, conversely, if you are sitting in an area where there is a cluster of synagogues or churches or mosques, that cluster also contributes to the risk of hate crime, because people have been known to try to do multiple incidents. So last night in Queens, swastikas, they hit different synagogues in the same neighborhood. So that's the kind of I would use if I was in an area with lots of synagogues. I would call attention to the Queens incident last night, where multiple synagogues were defaced with swastikas and homes. Okay, describe how the proposed facility hardening equipment and vulnerabilities will mitigate the identified threats. Again, they're asking the same question several times. This gives you more room to discuss it. I put in a discussion on cybersecurity here, just because I haven't really discussed it a lot. Now, and remember, you're going to have to do this kind of exercise for every one of the projects that you propose. So if you're going to do cameras and you're going to do fences and you're going to do bollards and you're going to do an access control system, you're going to do a lot of work. But you're going to get $250,000. So at least there's some sort of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Okay, question 10. 0 to 10 points. 0 if you leave this blank. What is the largest event attendance at the facility? And what is the average daily population at the facility? Now, average daily population, I find, if I was writing these questions, I would ask, about average attendance at weekly services, because that's very different than average attendance, where some people have very few, some of the facilities are barely used during the week. So I recommend that you answer the questions and then add, what your, for example, if it's, your Friday services in a mosque, and, add up the attendance of the 5 services, or Friday night and Saturday in a synagogue or Sunday in a church, and let them know. Because I have a feeling, and they don't answer this question, but I have a feeling that the more people you have, the more the points they'll give you. Let them know that you're being used, your facility's in use. Okay, question 11. They have developed, and if you look in your RFA, your request for applications, there's an appendix that has pages of every county in New York and assigns a score for every county. You don't have to do anything except put in N/A. They will fill it in based on their chart. My assumption is if you forget to put it in, you'll get a 0. If you put it in, there is no county in New York State that gets less than a 1, it doesn't get a 1. Most of the counties in the New York City area, including Long Island, Westchester, Rockland, get 5s. So you can't, you have nothing to do with this, but make sure you put NA, because I believe that if you leave it blank, you'll get 0. Okay, we've kind of touched on this before, and this is an oldie but a goodie slide. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Get what you really need. And, essentially, this grant is going to be tough. There's a lot of moving parts here, a lot of things to write about. But nevertheless, it's harder to implement the grant and spend the money according to New York State rules than it is getting the grant. First of all, this application needs details and answer questions for each of the projects that you propose. So, if you're proposing a cybersecurity and bollards and cameras and window coating, you're going to have to do all of that. Now, you may be able to budget under $250,000, and be able to get everything, but it just might be too hard. We see lots of people who can't get this done in 2 years. So, make sure that you have the capacity to do what you have to do. Eventually, you're going to have to get bids from multiple vendors for each category of equipment. and training. This grant does not provide for any personnel. It will provide for cybersecurity planning, consultants for cybersecurity, but not general planning. The government doesn't approve your hardware installation, so you need to be able to figure out what kind of cameras do I get? And, CSI is here to help, by the way, but all of this takes time. We won't make the decisions for you, but we'll give you more information on which to make your decision. If you've won grants for, a bunch of things, you're going to have to do bidding, competitive bidding. The New York State procurement system is meant to weed out people who shouldn't be in this business, who, want to cheat. And therefore, there's a lot of steps, safeguards and checks and balances that are built in. And you might not be able to do 4 items. And you don't have to apply for the full 250. There will be a grant next year. So do that, step by step. And if you need help with procurement, click here because, you can apply to get our help. I said all of that before I do budget because you're going to need to do information on the budget for each one of these items. I tell you here how to do it within the budget. And if you look at the RFA, page 48 following has the guide that you should be using. Okay. When you pull up this budget detail worksheet, aren't we excited with all this? When you pull this up, first thing you see is personnel. Well, its quality control says staff or personnel costs are not allowable because this is a capital funding grant. No guards. Don't think, just because this is here, you can say I need guards. Second thing you'll see is consultants. Now, they ask you the consultant name. I think that the answer is TBD, to be determined, because you can't know the consultant name until you do bidding. Anything, any item that is, anything that you're buying, you're going to have a consultant. They ask their hourly, the estimated hourly or daily fee, $75 an hour, I said, 4 hours, so $300. And then you put that through. You also, if you're doing cybersecurity, you're going to need, you can do in your cybersecurity grant, you can pay for consultants to help you with the planning, the implementation, and the training involved. And that's cybersecurity. It goes under consultants. And here's an example. We want to retain a consultant to conduct 2 sessions for our staff. We'll work to identify. Remember, here, they're telling you what they want. Read and follow directions. They want to know the explanation of the cost to be paid, travel, meals, lodging per guidelines. In other words, $650 for an 8-hour day is the top rate, unless you get approval to go above that. So I said we're going to go proposals and curricula. That should be an A there from each bidder. the cost for the 2 sessions will be $300 plus travel and meals per OSC guidelines. Okay. Equipment, pretty straightforward. Now, I wrote some things that are strictly equipment. Again, cybersecurity, everything that you do, all of the software as a service, firewalls, those kind of things are all equipment. And as long as you don't have to modify your structure and do alterations, it goes in equipment. If there's installation involved, you have to use alterations. So if you're putting in a door, if you're putting in fencing, if you're putting in network equipment and it has to be mounted to the wall, you're going to have to put it in alterations and put in the justifications here. And so your budget should reflect a total of 24, the cost for 24 months. So if you're buying cameras and you have to have licenses, throw in, and it's $100 a month for the license, you need to include $2,400 for licenses for each camera. Your budgets can only add up to $250,000. You must have sufficient detail to justify the expenses. Software packages are considered equipment. The costs associated with the development of cybersecurity plans go in on the consultant category. And your budget must be reasonable and appropriate as determined by DCJS. So what they do, the app, GMS will, produce a budget summary. But what they do is they say that you should have, they recommend, and I'll get to this in a minute, at least one bid. And that will help them arrive at the fact that it's reasonable and appropriate. If it's crazy, if your one bid is crazy, you're going to be called out on it and get fewer points. Now, 13 is detail how you plan to procure any vendors, contractors, equipment for your proposed project. Please illustrate how this adheres to page 5 of the RFA. Well, you say that you're going to follow all of the applicable procurement rules. You will note the rules on page 5 that you have to do bidding at least. On larger things, you have to do more steps. So you should include all of this for your to have a good answer. Now, include the fact that you will work in close contact with your DCJS program manager and follow their guidance. That's an important thing that they're looking for, and that that there is someone to whom you can ask, Mother, may I? And, especially if you get an email back that says, yes, you may, you have a pretty good chance of getting your money back reimbursed at the end of the line. You can say that you are going to apply for eligibility to buy off government contracts. and therefore you'll be able to make sure that all the costs are reasonable. And that's something that they, again, it answers the reasonable standard. If you're buying for less and it's not hard to pay less than New York State does, then that's good. You will check to make sure that any and all vendors and subcontractors have the necessary licenses, approvals, certifications currently required by the laws of any applicable local, state, or federal government. That's something that, as a building owner, you have to do anyway. Someone wrote, "How do I know how to do this?" Well, if you don't know how to do it, you're going to eventually have to hire someone who can help you if you're doing $250,000 worth of work. And you have to note that you're going to retain all the appropriate records of procurement for more than 6 years. So again, this is not simple. There's lots of hoops to jump through. Then you have to do a standardized work plan, which is basically copy and paste things from the RFA, and make sure that you paste it both into GMS and into your MS Word document. And the easiest question, have you ever gotten a hate crimes grants before? Yes or no? If the answer is no, you get 5 extra points. Now, here's some FAQs. You are not locked into the budget that you submit on July 8th. As a matter of fact, if you're a winner, you will be assigned a program manager, and your program manager will work with you and make changes to the budget, but the proposed changes must be related to risks or vulnerabilities identified in the original application or the corresponding vulnerability assessment. It has to be there. You can't make up new vulnerabilities. You must occupy and use the facility. Lots of people, come to me and say, well, we're in construction now. The building be ready in September. Can we apply for security grants for that building? The answer is no. You must be occupying and using the facility on July 8th. One application across the organization, even if you have multiple sites. You need a vulnerability assessment for each site. You need to do bids. And it says very clearly, a quote or explanation describing the basis of the cost estimate for each budget line should, and I added the emphasis, should be used to support the reasonableness of the estimate, included in the application. Please note that this estimate does not satisfy the New York State procurement laws. It's just, you're going to have to do work now to get an estimate. New project, and make sure that you say if this is a new project or an extension of a previous one. And, finally, I have in the orange box to the left, if you have any questions, submit them by tomorrow. And this is the email address. So, remember I said read and follow directions. You will have to submit an application, completed application by July 8th. You have to be eligible. You have to be pre-qualified. And you have to do a gender-based violence and workplace attestation. I have a link to the boilerplate language, But if you have any questions about that, see your attorney. Then that's the beginning. And then you have to answer all those 15 questions, both in the questions tab of GMS and on a Word document or PDF attachment. So that's fun. Budget detail and justification provided in the GMS budget tab, itemizing and justifying eligible expenses in support of the project. I believe since budget and the budget tab is a question, then you also have to cut and paste it into Word. You need a completed standardized project work plan. Same thing there. And if you propose a cybersecurity project, you must include a cybersecurity self-assessment. Now, deep breath, are we done? No, because they want a ground level photo of your the front facade of your facility. And they put in some specifications there. And they want photos for every interior or exterior location where work is proposed to be performed. Photos must be labeled in a manner describing the prospective project. Now, what I would do, and I'm going to submit this to DCJS as a question. I would put all of the photos in a PowerPoint document so that I can label them and these are my cameras and these are my this is my fence, et cetera, et cetera. That really helps you get organized rather than attaching 45 photos, but I don't know if that's kosher or not. Pre-qualification. Start now. We have a whole series of every step of pre-qualification. We have both the slides and video recordings for many of them. Now, I went back here, and this is tier 1. If you forget any of these, it's a TKO. You're out of contention. They will not do your grant. And it's their hope that, they have 280 grants available, and they hope that by eliminating people on tier 1, they'll be able to give grants to everyone who at least got this far. Then you get to tier 2, which reviewers look at all your questions and give you scores. They really don't want to do this. 2 grants ago, they didn't have to. The last grant they had to, score. And here are some details on how they score and do tiebreakers and all kinds of things. Who knows what's going to happen? And then it goes to the big bosses at the TCJS executive staff, and they'll decide what's best for the state. I don't know what that means. But understand that all of these steps happen. If you have questions, you can mail them to CSI Questions, and we'll get back to you. Jamie usually gets those and sends them to me immediately if she can't answer it herself. So, we get that. We have information on security grants, pre-qualification, and post-grant assistance, and questions. They say the things they'll answer is, did DCJS receive my email? Well, they'll answer that. I don't know what else they'll answer. aside from, after tomorrow. And that's the story. So, Jamie,
David.
what are they looking for?
So if they received a prior award but did not execute the funding, do they need to answer why? Do they need to answer we did not receive prior funding, or say yes and explain the award and that they were unable to implement any of the project and why they were unable to implement?
I would advise them to write that tonight and send it to DCHJS funding, this address. And they don't cover that in the, in the RFA. I would venture to say, if you have a grant and you've asked for an extension, then you should just tell them that we're working on it and you plan to mitigate it with the 2022 grant.
Got it. So I have another question. So if an organization applied before and they were rejected and now they're applying again, are they first-time applicants?
Right. If you have never received a grant, and if you're rejected, you never received the grant, you get the bonus points.
So I have a procurement question. I'm not sure if you're ready for that. We didn't cover this. They want to clarify the RFA says equipment under 50,000 does not require a formal bidding process, only 3 quotes. Is that correct?
What I would do is, do not ask me, ask their program manager. Do that in writing and say, we have a $50,000 item, and therefore we're going to get 3 bids. Is this sufficient? And our advice is always ask Mother May I. That's what the program managers are for. I'm looking at our teammate Seth, and he's gotten all kinds of weird answers because he's also, does the grants for his synagogue. That's the best guarantee is that you have. And because it's the program manager that must sign off on your reimbursement request.
So when listing all previously funded projects, both federal and state, do they need to include photos?
They want to know if you're asking for something that's similar. Let me just see the wording. Okay. Describe the specific location of any previously funded projects. This description. So it's any. They want photos of previously funded state or federal projects because it's the only way they know what you've done. This is more steps and harder than the federal grant. What happens with the federal grant and dishes is the program managers have been working for dishes for years, and they know your facility. They visited them. So they know that stuff already. DCJS doesn't necessarily have that level of knowledge.
I believe that's it for the questions.
Okay, so we're going to leave you with, 6 more minutes. We'll give back to your life. 6 minutes. And we hope this was helpful. And we will see you, and just keep those cards and letters coming. Just send things to CSI questions. And we will get back to you with the best answers we know. Thank you.
Thank you, David.